Well, my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about The Bad Batch? Stick around and find out. Now, I know I normally try to do some kind of tailor-made musical intro thing here for each movie that I watch, that kind of fits whatever the movie is. I couldn't think of anything, especially not in the crunch that I have trying to do a week's worth of content in 3 days before the Thanksgiving break. So, the only thing I could think of would be to, sit here quietly and, just let there be a lot of silence, and then every once in a while take a sip from my drink. Because there's a there's a lot of silence in this movie. But I thought, if I just kind of sit in silence for a while, people are totally gonna be like, something's wrong, crappy channel, watch something else. So anyway, I'm Peter Franston from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of uncut reviews. Forgot to do of The Bad Batch. This one, I don't know if it got a big release in theaters. It's got some noticeable names and faces in it. But anyway, the IMDb synopsis reads: The Bad Batch follows Arlen after she's left in a Texas wasteland fenced off from civilization. While trying to navigate the unforgiving landscape, Arlen is captured by a savage band of cannibals led by the mysterious Miami Man. With her life on the line, she makes her way to the Dream. That's weird. I'm not sure if that makes sense, because they're putting the names in parentheses after Arlen and parentheses Waterhouse, because that's the last name of the actress, and then the mysterious Miami Man, Momoa, played by Jason Momoa, and then she makes her way to the Dream, and they put Reeves, which refers to Keanu Reeves. I don't remember him being the Dream, and so that's a weird. I don't get that. Anyway, with her life on the line, she makes her way to, we'll just say, a safe place, or a place she thinks is safe, as she adjusts to life in the Bad Batch. And that's not really appropriate either, because they are the Bad Batch. They're not in the Bad Batch. They're in the wasteland. Anyway, as she adjusts to life in the Bad Batch, Arlen discovers that being good or bad mostly depends on who's standing next to you. Boy, the more I look at that, the weirder that description is. Anyway, this is a post-apocalyptic drama, I guess I would call it, with a slow pace and very little dialogue. Now, it's not really post-apocalyptic, because the characters all live in a quarantined part of Texas that might even be present day, like alternate reality justice system or whatever in Texas. But they live in this quarantined wasteland area of Texas as a result of being non-functioning members of society. That's really the most that we get that's probably objectively clear as far as why they're there. Why have they been sentenced to this place? It's not clear what they've done wrong. Certainly, at least potentially unjust. This wasteland is, I think, but we aren't told what these people did. So maybe it's not so unjust, because at the end of the day, we just don't know what they each individually did, except, vaguely what they say from their own biased perspective. They say we're non-functioning members of society, and I get the sense that's a quote, so that probably is legit. But then, a guy that goes and kind of gives a big monologue about, this is why we're here, we're rejects, they say this about this, they say this about this. Well, who knows how much of that accurately represents what they've been sentenced with or whatever. Obviously there's bias involved. We don't hear the other side. We don't see the society outside of the wasteland, and so we don't hear their perspective on why these people are there. So it's hard to get a sense of, are their guilt or innocence, or are any of these characters heroes? Are they good guys? It's hard to figure out who to root for or how to root for them. Even the female lead who's the protagonist. If there's someone that we're supposed to root for, I think it's probably her. She's clearly selfish and tragically vain. In fact, vanity is a common trait among the characters in this world. Despite living in a dump and looking like a mess, they're still kind of vainly pursuing attractive appearance. Because of the dysfunctional and often outright evil nature of even the protagonists, I could feel some compassion for them, but couldn't really cheer for the success of their endeavors. The sparse dialogue also made motives hard to figure out for me at times, which made the experience feel often directionless. This was especially rough for me near the middle, when a kind of drug-induced, pseudo-dreamlike sequence seemed to drag on without any point. In this dreary, hopeless world, every character was scrambling to find pleasure or comfort or sustenance or happiness, but there was no clear goal for me to hope that the characters would reach. The closest thing to that was the pursuit of the dream, or the one thing that matters, as one character maybe calls it, which ultimately was left to be defined by the individual and their own motives and desires, which leads us back to the problem of unclear motives giving me no goal to root the characters on toward. All that said, although character-driven fiction is by far my favorite, that's what I tend to really connect with, I also sometimes enjoy figuring out a new world that's being presented to me, as with, say, Mad Max Fury Road or the recent Ghost in the Shell remake. Along with that, I enjoy trying to figure out what message, if any, is intended by the storytellers. So trying to figure out the world and decipher thematic messaging did keep me fairly interested in the movie, even though it had some slow bits where I was like, come on, come on, come on. As far as the cast goes, there are some familiar faces, and one that should have been very familiar to me, but that I didn't quite recognize. Newcomer Suki Waterhouse plays the lead, and she was fine. Jason Momoa was the male supporting lead, doing his usual gruff and grim routine, but with a kind of a Cuban accent. Keanu Reeves felt a little out of place to me in his seemingly 70s kingpin role. Jim Carrey was unrecognizable to me until I went to IMDb afterward. Although once during the movie I thought, boy, that actor looks a little like Jim Carrey, but no, that's not him. It totally was. I was like, what the crap? Anyway, so there was definitely some recognizable names involved in this movie. But still, that didn't result in performances that really brought out the characters' motivations clearly to me. As far as stunts and visuals go, it's a drama, so I mean, don't expect, lots of explosions and that kind of special effects work. There was lots of limb removal effects, since cannibals in this world are responsible for cutting off and eating human limbs, and a few people survived this process, including a main character. Otherwise, it was visually interesting at times in kind of the way it was shot and visually the way the story was told, but not dazzling or visually stunning to me as Redbox describes this movie. Let's see, I don't usually talk about music and sound. I'll just briefly say, though, that the music also slowed the pace for me, as pop music tunes with slow beats were often chosen as the backdrop for already slow visual storytelling. Oh man, my phone's going off! Gotta do some laundry after this. Alright, it's uncut! We go on! Okay, so I always try to ask myself, is there anything of worthwhile moral, philosophical, spiritual significance going on in the themes here that would bring about worthwhile thought or conversation? It's often hard for me to tell what a storyteller is trying to maybe say, quote unquote, with their work. Sometimes, I just want to tell writers, can you stop being so passive aggressive and just write a philosophy paper so we can put your ideas openly and clearly on the table for proper evaluation. But, maybe they don't want to be subject to that, or maybe they are just trying to prioritize entertaining over teaching, which, I wouldn't begrudge them that. Am I using that word right? I don't know. Anyway, whatever the case, I don't know exactly for sure what was being said by this movie, intentionally, that is. But I drew a number of my own parallels. The first was to that of hell, a parallel I also draw when looking at Mad Max Fury Road or the Mad Max video game. Despite how hell has been treated in the arts for hundreds of years, there are a lot of details we actually can't be certain about because of the use of metaphor when hell is described. There is genuine room for the possibility that hell will be a physical location like a planet that will be separated from the rest of creation, inhabited by those who want to just be left to their own devices, making their own rules, and maybe even attempting to hold together their own sort of society. God would still oversee that and ensure that no one suffers any more than they are due, but it could still look a lot like the worlds we see in movies like The Bad Batch and Mad Max Fury Road, I think. Now, for more of my thoughts on hell and what the Bible does and doesn't actually say about it, I'll try to put a link in the YouTube description to a video I made on the subject. I'm in a big crunch, so if I forget, you can just do a search on this channel for "Is hell really what we think it is?" I think is the name of that video. Probably if you just put in hell, that'll get you there. Anyway, the second parallel I saw was not to a potential future life in hell, but to actually this present life, which I think of the two is the more likely intended theme from the writer. Our world is just so obviously broken, filled with people just scrambling for pleasure, purpose, admiration, love, and happiness. But the evil and dysfunction of those around us and our own evil and dysfunction prevent us from having the things that we want most in life, or we obtain them maybe, but only in a limited or just this kind of tainted, broken, dysfunctional form. In the movie, one option is to live in a town called comfort, where comfort and convenience is prioritized and there is more order. But the ultimate goal turns out to be little more than just kind of perpetuating life, or as my pastor calls it, pumping blood. We're just kind of surviving to survive and getting what comfort we can in the process. The other option presented in this world is to live more freely out in the wasteland, but in that place, people literally cannibalize each other in pursuit of what they want. There's also arguably a message here about the vanity of pursuing physical attractiveness to such a great degree as many characters, especially the female lead, seem just like tragically concerned about their appearance, even in the post-apocalyptic wasteland where there are much greater concerns at stake. It may be that the movie's intended final message, as I kind of see it in the final scene, is that we should take small moments of beauty and love where we can find them, flawed as they are. But that felt like a far cry from a happy ending to me, if that was the message. And it just kind of reminded me of our need for a rescuer, someone to fix our brokenness and save us from ourselves and the mess we've made for ourselves and each other, both as a species and as individuals. Now, I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I would go back in time and say, hey, Peter, skip this one. Skip it. Because you know other movies with similar themes that you would have a better time just watching again instead of watching this movie for the first time. It has an interesting world and themes, but you won't often be in the mood for a movie that moves this slowly or keeps its characters' motivations this kind of obscured or vague. It's rated R for violence, language, some drug content, and brief nudity. And on the nudity front, it's a woman briefly looking at a magazine with pictures of nude women in it. It's kind of at an angle, so it is brief and not like a terribly great view of it. So, all right, well, those are my thoughts. I'd love to get yours in the comments below. Please consider supporting this channel by becoming a Spirit Blade Insider, which grants you exclusive monthly behind-the-scenes content. For more information about that and information about our podcast and audio dramas, you can visit spiritblade.com. And of course, finally, there's a ton more content and community over at christiangeekcentral.com. So I hope you'll join us there soon as we continue. Where's that button? To geek out and seek the truth.